All right, I think we're going to get started. As many of you know, our president is Aggie, so I usually start out my presentations by saying, howdy, any Aggies in the room. But I appreciate y'all being here for the Liberty Cities panel. I'm sure most of y'all are wondering, what is a Liberty City? Well, we will answer that question very shortly. But before we start, I do want to talk a little bit about a personal story. And is Jana McMillan here? Jana? There she is. Okay. I'm going to mention Jana in a second. I was a city councilman in College Station from 2010 to 2013, after which I joined the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Now I'm the Center for Local Governance's Senior Policy Analyst. But while I was a councilman and when I was getting elected, there was this hot issue in College Station about a little place called Welborne, Texas. Now, Welborne is a little community just south of College Station. It's been there since 1867, and it's a small rural community, but as time went on, the March of Progress brought the development of College Station further and further southward into Welborne, which is in the College Station School District, but has a separate water district, and Welborne started to change. Over a period of time, College Station brought Welborne into the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Now, if you don't know what that is, basically that's a secondary city limits. A city can annex into the extraterritorial jurisdiction, and in order to bring an area into its ETJ, it has to have an annexation plan. So Welborne made its way into the annexation plan. And of course, the folks in Welborne were none too happy about this, but to their benefit, Welborne was only on a 20-year annexation schedule. Well, at this time, Jana McMillan back here, who is at policy orientation, I single her out, and I were pretty much the only two conservatives on the College Station City Council. And Welborne was trying to incorporate. And Welborne thought that they had the right to incorporate. They wanted to keep their character, even though they were in the ETJ. But the problem is that if you're in the ETJ of another city in Texas, you don't have the right to incorporate. In fact, you don't even have the right to stay out of the city limits. You have no right to determine which jurisdiction you're in, and Welborne didn't. And so, after a period of long discussion and quite a fight in the community, the citizens of Welborne, and this is a picture from the Eagle that I like. One of their slogans was, "Keep Welborne, Welborne." And those folks really had a great spirit. But unfortunately, after a long period of time, they lost their battle. They got annexed by the city of College Station. The vote was 5-2, and Jana and I were the two dissenting votes. And that was, to us, kind of a wake-up call, and to me a wake-up call. That in Texas, even though we protect individual rights as paramount above all else, we believe in freedom. We were born in a spirit of resistance against tyranny. We still have some areas in which people don't always have their rights protected. What are the origins of government? Briefly, I just want to review this because this is where the Liberty Cities concept comes in. Governments are formed for a common purpose, and many of you have heard the term consent of the governed. This is John Locke's term. It made its way into our founding documents. Governments derive their powers from individuals who voluntarily come together to form a government for the protection of rights and the provision of services. In the case of the United States, it was the protection of rights from unnecessary intrusion, the quartering of soldiers, taxation without representation. And so our government was formed to protect contracts and things like provide a court system and policing and national defense. This is why governments are formed, and they're formed voluntarily. The same thing is true with Texas cities in a very simple way. If you live in an unincorporated county, Judge Self, who is the judge of Collin County, is here. Thank you, Judge. If you live in an unincorporated area of a county, you have the right to form a city. In fact, counties are often the ones that stand up for cities that decide to form in their unincorporated areas, as long as you're not, as I stated, in an ETJ. If you're in the ETJ of another city, you can't. But if you're in an unincorporated area, you can. So a few years ago, this guy who I'm going to introduce in a second, Art Martinez, decided to form a city in the ETJ of San Antonio and sought consent to do so. helping to form the basis for this concept. But he did so because he wanted to protect the rights of the folks there in Von Ormy and provide some essential government services, defend against higher levels of government, in this case the city of San Antonio. And so what we're saying now is very simple. These cities are popping up all over the state of Texas. You're starting to see a movement that people want to get out of the thumb of higher levels of government, be it Washington or in some cases Austin, or San Antonio, or Houston, or any of the big cities in our state. I thought it was great. Governor Abbott, I don't know if you noticed, Governor-elect Abbott said cities are perhaps one of the greatest threats to the Texas miracle. As a former councilman, I agree. I think cities have a tendency to overregulate. And if you're in the ETJ of a city, you're not voting for their council members, and you have no right to decide what jurisdiction you're in. But if you can form your own city for the protection of individual rights, with the idea of not having property taxes, for example, or keeping a no debt promise to your citizens, and doing zero-based budgeting, you might be able to defend against annexation from some of these higher levels. So comes the Liberty Cities concept, and we are urging the Texas legislature to draft this into law and create a new type of city that if you're incorporating a city in Texas, this is an option. So I want to introduce my esteemed panelists. I've got Art Martinez, I should say attorney Art Martinez. Art Martinez is the founder and mayor of the city of Von Ormy, Texas, the first newly incorporated city in Bexar County in over 30 years. He assisted in eliminating the property tax in Von Ormy over a period of
6 years.
6 years, from 39 cents to zero. He served as the chief of staff to State Representative John Garza. Currently, he serves as the chief of staff for State Senator Connie Burton. And he received his undergraduate degree from the University of Texas, I can forgive that, and his law degree from St. Mary's University Law School. Art Martinez de Vara. Is this yours, Art?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Let's get our. Okay. Liberty City is on display. Our little verbiage there is the same that's in the packet, so we'll skip over that. Again, what is a Liberty City? Just did a good introduction. It's really kind of hard to pin down because this concept has been implemented in different communities, and of course every community is unique and has a slightly different expression of it. But I try to synthesize it down, and it's established on the principles of a limited government, preservation of individual and property rights, restrictions on debt and taxing authority. As an attorney, after we founded the city of Von Ormy, I was a law student at the time. It wasn't my intention to go into that area, but forming new cities isn't a very large practice. Doesn't happen very often. Typically, one, maybe two a year. Folks started calling us down in Von Ormy and had the blessing to be able to help 4 or 5 other cities incorporate. I think now we've done half of the new cities in Texas the last 10 years, just out of happenstance. So, and as Jess said, there's been a recent interest in this concept. There's been some media attention placed to it, and we see a lot of expansion of the large urban cities and even what had been mid-sized cities encroaching on long existing communities. In Von Ormy, we incorporated in 2008. Though our city was founded in the 1820s, San Antonio kind of grew into us. We have some of our demographics here. We're about 1,350 residents, 2.4 square miles. By all measure, a small city. We're roughly 90% Hispanic, 10% Anglo, and median income. We're on the south side of Bexar County. If you're familiar with Bexar County, the growth has predominantly occurred to the north and the northwest. So we're on the south side of Bexar County, right on I-35, on the way to Laredo. We incorporated mainly because of lack of development and trying to preserve the heritage of our community. Here's just 2 quick snapshots between the north side and the south side of Bexar County, the intersections of I-35 and Loop 1604, which is the main outer loop in Bexar County. To the left, you see a portion on the north side fully developed, mainly because of infrastructure, sewer and water, and on the south side, it's still rural and underdeveloped. This is the corridor that we focus on as far as our business corridor in Von Ormy. We have a Union Pacific rail yard and highway going down to Laredo. So, we were just a group of citizens. Everyone in this room here is obviously interested in politics, otherwise you wouldn't come all the way down to the TTPS orientation. We were no different, just average citizens, but we were blessed with this unique opportunity to experiment with democracy. People talk about it all the time, hey, if I were the president, I would do this, or if I was a governor, legislature should do that. Suddenly we found ourselves in a position to actually walk the walk. And so we took what was later defined as a Liberty City approach. I think it was the statesman that came up with that term. But first we started off with a virtual city hall as an example of a cost-saving measure. We looked around us and said, well, why do we need to build a brick and mortar palatial city hall? It's 2008 at the time. We're a small enough city. So our city hall was a website, and if you really didn't have access or you needed something, the city clerk would just drive over to your house and give you the form, which never happened. We eventually grew, and we had a couple of clerks, and so we purchased a prefabricated building which serves as our city offices. We decided to privatize public services. We just simply didn't have the resources to provide some of the services that we had, things such as garbage collection, inspections and all of that. So we privatized it and passed through the cost in the form of fees without any overage. So it's a direct pass through. So an example of a solid waste pickup. We did a price survey. We had 3 or 4 companies in our community. After privatization, the bill was 20% lower than the prior lower rate, mainly because we were able to give them a more denser area, and then we also got the first curbside recycling in a rural area in Bexar County, which our residents were pretty excited about. Our main competition is also a large urban city, San Antonio, and San Antonio has a lot of economic development tools that are provided by their tax base, tax incentives. They'll run infrastructure for business, water, sewer lines. There's no way we could compete on that level. So in sitting around and saying, well, what are our advantages? What can we compete with? We took the opposite approach. We said, what we're going to do is we're going to minimize the regulation. We're going to have a pro-business tax structure. We're going to have we want to eliminate property taxes. We established a no-fee city. There's no fee for, I shouldn't say there's no fee. We have one permit. We think we have $1 million solid waste permit. Somebody said, well, what if they build a sewer treatment plant? So they put $1 million fee on that one. Other than the $1 million fee, there are no fees in the city. That one got through. And we wanted to shift the tax burden off of our property taxpayers onto consumption taxes. As you saw, we're a corridor city. We're on I-35. And so we have a lot of people drive through our community, stop at our grocery stores and gas stations and whatnot. And we wanted to utilize that as a community asset. We're also a poor community. We have a lot of folks that are retired or on fixed incomes, and property taxation is the single greatest threat to continued land ownership. And people will say, oh, you can defer your taxes, but then they lose what's often the only asset that they've built up over a lifetime. So we wanted to shift away from that because of the economic level of our community. And so we decided to set up this no-fee, low-regulation system in order to incentivize economic development. We try to avoid restrictions on personal freedoms. We had one big incident where a council member wanted to put in a nighttime curfew for minors, and we called in all the high school seniors for the town, came in. I have a master's in history as well, so I gave a lecture on everything on restrictions on travel being the basis of the slave codes of Jim Crow, and basically told him as mayor, if anybody ever tries to restrict your freedom of travel, you sue, you raise hell, and don't let these people vote that way. And it quickly went down in flames. And after that, we don't. So we're the only city in Bexar County where our kids aren't pre-labeled as criminals, and they can walk around at night, and we haven't had any problems. We use trained volunteers. I was a volunteer firefighter, so we started out with volunteer animal control officers. We have a volunteer police force. We have a paid marshal, and the rest are volunteers. Again, no fees for city residents. Asterisk, unless you want to build a solid waste facility, you got to pay $1 million. And we located some taxes and some taxing jurisdictions that our community had belonged to that we weren't getting services in, such as via the Bexar County Public Transportation, and we withdrew. We were able to add in a slew of city services, which we'll put up there. I know we're running low. And we didn't want to infringe on people's rights. We're the only city where you can pop fireworks. We have no additional gun restrictions, no curfew. You can have a cigar, soda, pop a firework. I don't know. I'd get a building permit for free. We established zero-based budgeting. Now, as we shifted towards consumption taxes, a lot of people get nervous. Obviously, consumption taxes vary more widely than property taxes. We had to increase our reserve funds just as a hedge against those fluctuations. We voted long-term debt. We haven't gotten into any. We utilized trained volunteers, so someone would say, you know what, I'll serve as a city clerk. All right, we'll send you to city clerk training. And again, we're a small city, we're able to do these kinds of things. So this is the effect of our economic development policies. Again, businesses started moving in, others started expanding. We got a pilot truck stop, we got a subway. A lot of folks indicated to us it was because of our minimal regulation. Had they gone one exit in either direction, they would have been in San Antonio's jurisdiction. Tens of thousands of dollars in regulatory fees and delays. So we were able to capitalize on that somewhat, and we see a rise in increase. Eagle Ford Shell traffic helps as well. There's no doubt about that. So that helps as well. Asterisk there, with the recent plunge in oil prices, our sales tax has kind of leveled off. So we anticipate it not increasing next year, but roughly being the same. And then rather than spending the extra money, what we did is we used it as tax relief, and we slowly dropped property taxes. And again, in 2015, we were able to eliminate it this year, property taxes. This is the 2012 comparison, just showing the impact of public debt. People always ask us, compare us to San Antonio. But basically, if you look at the INS, which is what they're paying on their to maintain their public debt, other than that, the maintenance and operation of a small city and a very large city are roughly the same as far as the percentage of taxation. So if you can avoid debt, you can keep property taxes very, very low. We have some folks here from Sandy Oaks and Kingsbury. They've had other experiments. And then the final slide here is on our statutory Liberty City concept. Just so you know, there's different types of cities in Texas. We have home rule cities, which are all the big cities. They have their own charter. It's kind of their own constitution. And they set up their own rules for themselves. We're talking about statutory cities. We're starting small, where we can have a greater impact. They're under 5,000. Right now, there's 3 types of cities, A, B, and C. A's are for the larger, small cities. B's and C's are for the smaller, and the main difference are the types of government. A type C has a mayor and 2 commissioners, so the mayor votes, and type B is a traditional city council with the mayor and 5 aldermen. Mayor only votes in case of a tie. So we're proposing a type D, which would be a Liberty City. Maybe they'll let us skip to type L, I don't know. And the basic concept being that there'll be a residence bill of rights with subject matter restrictions, meaning that the city is not able to pass regulations. One of the challenges that we foresee is even though we've set up some of these Liberty cities, it's really based upon the current leadership of those cities to maintain that level. And people are always asking, well, what happens when you're not mayor? What happens when the city council change? What happens in 20 years when other folks come in who used to live in Houston and say we want to do those types of things? And so the concept is to put it into statute to preserve those rights. So I'm out of time, so.
Thank you, Mayor. You can drink a soda and smoke a cigar in Von Ormy.
And pop a firework.
Yeah, pop fireworks.
Nothing like New York City. Robert Grafe is the executive assistant at the Guadalupe County Judge's Office. He's also the program director and court coordinator at the Guadalupe County Veterans Treatment Court. Previously, he was a vice president and chief real estate appraiser at Frost National Bank in San Antonio. He served as a major in the United States Army and he received his bachelor's degree from Southwest Texas State University in Business Management. For the purposes of our panel, he is the Mayor Pro Tempore of the newest city in Texas, Sandy Oaks, Texas. Ernest Gay.
Well, first I want to say thank you for inviting me to this panel. I've never done this. I never ran for political office before. I spent 24 years in San Antonio as a police officer before I did this. And why I got into this, sometimes I question myself. I don't know. But anyway, a little history. I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint for you. I do have several handouts here. If they want to take those and pass them out around the crowd, there's a few there that give a little history of our city. Anyway, we began the incorporation process way back in February of 2011. To give you a little history, Sandy Oaks is completely within San Antonio's ETJ. So in other words, we needed their permission in order to incorporate. They did that by coming out and canvassing the voters. They got 50 signatures, presented it to the city of San Antonio. We originally wanted 9 square miles of area to be our city. That would have included parts of Loop 1604 and Interstate 37 South. City said, no, you can't have that. They cut us down to 4 square miles. And when it was all said and done, we ended up with a whopping 2.4 square miles with absolutely no highway or major artery involved at all. Unlike Von Ormy, we are starting out with very little. All of this began, I don't know if any of you are familiar with down in South Bexar County in San Antonio, but there's 2 major companies down there. One of them is called Weatherford and the other is called Halliburton. They have a few dollars worldwide amongst the 2 of them. Weatherford been there for a long time, and they would have been in our city, but they expanded and moved across the highway. And then, of course, Halliburton came in and set up a 30 or 40 acre deal there on 1604. We missed both of them. So anyway, on May the 10th, 2014, last year, we had an election to incorporate. The election passed 3-1 in favor. There was only 96 that voted for, 32 against. But keep in mind, we're a small community. There was a little over 1,000 registered voters in our area. And this turned out to be 10.6% of the registered voters. And I tell everybody that is actually a phenomenal voting rate when you have a single ballot item in a very small community. It doesn't generate a lot of interest, and not a lot of people come out to vote. Later that year, back on August 9th last year, we had vote for mayor and alderman. The mayor was unopposed. The 5 aldermen, there was 8 of us running, 5 of us won. And that election turned out about 16% of our registered voters. It also was a standalone election. Then basically our biggest deal from wanting to get our own city done was the city of San Antonio announced a limited purpose annexation. They announced this annexation that brought their city limit line down to the northern boundary of our area, and it was in effect on January the 8th of 2014, and it's a 3-year run that they have on this, that they could decide if it's going to be viable for them to go ahead and annex it completely. With them being that close and also being in their ETJ, we decided that 3,500 to 4,000 people living in our area, did we really and truly want to be a part of a city that has a $9.4 billion debt and has 1.4 million people in it? What would our voice be? Well, our voice would be very minimal. Now, don't get me wrong, we incorporated, but it wasn't without opposition. We had a lot of people that, a few people that said, oh, we didn't get the word out, we didn't announce it, we named it Sandy Oaks when actually the subdivision we were in was called Waterwood, and people were confused and didn't think it affected them. Not true. It was in the papers, it was on the news, we had signage out, and 10.6% of the people came out and voted. The city of San Antonio, when they released this 2.4 square miles that they gave us, they made it very clear that that is all that we could have. If we wanted more, we had to come back later and request it, or citizens around us that own property would have to petition in order to become a part of our city. Big cities that have an ETJ do not care when they release that area whether or not the area they release is going to be viable for you to operate. That's going to be your problem once you get it. And that is what our problem has become. One of the main problems we have is lack of business. We had only 4 businesses within our city limits. We have a 5th that is proposed that wants to come in now. It is one of the dollar stores, and that's going to be a big one for us. And they are looking to build yesterday if they can. They already own the land. They want it. So anyway, that is going to be our main, one of our main sources of revenue is the sales tax. Another source of revenue is, of course, our franchise fees. And one of the biggest helpers we had in the franchise fee was actually our City Public Service Energy, our electric supplier. They came on board immediately. They met with us. They gave us their agreement. And their fiscal year is broken down into quarters. Their last quarter ran from November 1st until the end of February. In March, we will receive the 4% franchise fee from them. And that'll really be our first big check. Let's see, where did I go here? In November of 2014, our city council decided not to adopt a tax rate for the fiscal year 2014. Now, the way tax rates run, your tax rate, or the taxes you pay on this year, are actually what supplies next year's budget. So if we would have done a 2014 tax, back taxed them in other words, we'd have had money coming in this January for operating funds this year. It was not the intent of our council to do that. We did not want to burden our residents, which are mainly fairly poor individuals to begin with a tax that they probably would not be able to afford. So we opted not to set a tax. We didn't set it at 0. We didn't adopt a tax rate. We just adopted to forego the tax and say we're not going to adopt one this year. If we need one for 2015, we'll look at that and see what we can set it at. Our goal at first was to try to get 38 cents. When we saw what we could make from City Public Service, we dropped it down to 30. Now we're looking at, hey, we got some people coming in. We got some money coming in franchise-wise. We may be able to eliminate that tax altogether if at all possible. And I know the council would be definitely for that. One of the big things that we did have was November 4th, we had the general election for the year on November 4th. We had three or four proposals on the ballot. One was a 1% sales tax, another 0.5%, a 1/4% that went to street maintenance, and we tried to get out of the VIA metropolitan tax. The 3 taxes for the penny and the 1/2 cent, and then of course the 1/4% for roads and maintenance passed. The VIA, eliminating VIA, that failed. We don't know why yet, but anyway, we're going to look into it because VIA does not provide, that is the bus service in San Antonio, they do not provide us with any service. And he says my time's up. So anyhow, basically that's what it is. We are a new city. We're very adamant about wanting to try to remain a pay-as-you-go is what we call it. We want to set our budget according to what our income is and not try to set our income according to what we want. That just, it hasn't worked anywhere from the local level all the way up to the national level. You can see what that is. Thank you, Jeff. Oh, that's yours. Yes. That was mine.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You opted not to set a tax?
We opted not to set one.
What alternate universe are you from? That's not how government works.
And the vote was unanimous, I might say. And
I realize
it doesn't get paid for a while because of it.
I realize now I made a grave error, and I apologize. I actually introduced Robert Grafe instead of Ernest Gay, and I just wasn't thinking here. The way this was set up was different than what was on the paper. So Ernest Gay, just so you know, was in the San Antonio Police Department from 1973 until he retired, and when he was in Sandy Oaks, and of course, is the mayor pro tem. Now, Bob Grafe, I apologize,
No apology necessary.
Is the Executive Assistant at the Guadalupe County Judge's Office, Program Director, Court Coordinator at Guadalupe County Veterans Treatment Court. He was previously Vice President, Real Estate Appraiser at Frost National Bank in San Antonio, was a major in the United States Army, and had his bachelor's degree from Southwest Texas State University in Business Management. That Robert Grafe is a incorporation activist for the as yet unincorporated possible Liberty City of Kingsbury between Seguin and Luling. And I apologize for the bio mix-up. Mr. Grafe, the real Robert Grafe, please stand up. Sorry about that, guys.
I thought Big Brother was really looking over what was going on, and I didn't pay any attention to my 26 years in the police department. That was great. Listen, I'll keep this brief, and I just want to put a little caveat. First is that any mention of the state legislature that I might make to in my brief remarks that might be looked upon as negative have absolutely nothing to do with our good friend Mr. Simpson on the end. He'll probably explain away anything that I might say about the legislature that might be, I hope, helpful. The city of Kingsbury does not exist. However, the community of Kingsbury, Texas, and as somebody caught on to near Luling, and kind of between Luling and Seguin, there's a 130-year history to that community that we're attempting to preserve. That's our main reason for seeking incorporation. And I'll tell you what the motivation was and what kind of woke everyone up in our community. And it might be similar to anyone out here who might be looking at considering this type of approach in forming your own municipality within the rules of the state of Texas statutes. And that was, we got a wake-up call. The wake-up call was from our good friends in the city of Seguin, who forgot to tell us that we were now in their extraterritorial jurisdiction. Now, there is no statutory requirement for them to do anything. However, we think that there's no rule against just a neighborly little call. Oh, by the way, when you wake up tomorrow, you're part of Seguin. And you can pay fees to us, by the way, and we have a few other little restrictions that you need to pay attention to. That did not happen. So that caught our attention. A few of us got together and we formed the Kingsbury Incorporation Committee that began unofficially in the firehouse at Kingsbury, where that is kind of the center point of our community. And that started us looking at other issues that we thought, whoa, we want to preserve some things here. We have a 130-year heritage. We have a fire department that functions well. We have a legitimate community that doesn't want to move. People move there and stay. They don't come in and out. They move there and stay. Or they've been born and raised there and frequently stay. They want to keep that heritage in place. And so we, fortunately, as Jess alluded to, we ran into Art. And I'm not sure exactly the exact detail of how that happened, because I was kind of a relatively late comer to this program. I was 60 days behind the curve. And so when I finally got the word, I said, you bet, let's get this thing going. Now, Art has been very helpful with us as we've sort of attempted to model our approach after Von Ormy. As you saw in the slide presentation, Von Ormy is kind of a model city. And I would recommend that you do everything you can, including getting on their website, and take a look and see if that doesn't work. I did stop by the property taxation meeting a little bit ago when it was just first starting up. And I noticed on the screen that there was a % increase in property taxation. I think that was statewide. I wasn't on the inside, so I was having a hard time lip reading what they were saying. It was 79% increase in 11 years in property tax. We don't want that. We want a no tax, ideally, no debt form of our own community. I've got a lot of other things in here. I'm going to recommend that you take a look at that on your time. But I want to close because I want to leave some time for my friend down at the end because he's the key. He is one of the keys. The state legislature can't do magic. He's actually a reincarnated Houdini, and the entire the entire legislation probably belongs to the International Brotherhood of Magicians. But what needs to happen is we do, like was presented earlier, Jess gave a little snapshot of what we could do, or Art, I can't remember which one of you guys did that, looking at another form of city. And that form of city would protect heritage. It would protect having to have this mindset that some organizations do in the state of Texas and elsewhere, that you have to grow in order to have a successful community. You have to annex. You have to have that power as a home rule city, for example, to go out and grab land and to take it back into your ETJ where you can control. And in our case, we can help pay off somebody else's debt, which we don't have any intention to do. So that put us back into the same situation that Sandy Oaks and Von Ormy were in previously, and we're there. I'm going to just thank you for putting up with us. I would like to encourage you can contact me or anybody on the panel for more information. Our contact information is on, I think, on the back of the handouts. If you're thinking about what the title of this little handout is and what it means, give me liberty or give me Houston. Okay? I'm just going to end with that. Thank you very much.
Now that was Bob Grafe. Thank you very much, Bob. And finally, and if I mess up this introduction, I think I have no business working for TPPF. If you believe in liberty, he almost needs no introduction, but David Simpson serves in the State House of Representatives in District 7 for 3 terms now. And a lot of people don't know, he served for 3 terms as a mayor of the city of Avenger, a little town, I believe, outside of Longview. Is that right? From 1993 to 1998. He was commissioned by then Governor Bush to serve as a member of the Architects Regional Review Committee in 1996. Received his 1983 graduate degree from Vanderbilt University, and is a 1988 graduate of Trinity Ministerial Academy of Montville, New Jersey. Thank you for being with us, Representative Simpson.
It would be appropriate. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. Thank you, Jess. I do want to correct a couple of things from the outset. I've just served almost 2 terms and have been reelected to a 3rd term in the Texas House. So I'd like to remind people that as a sophomore, I know enough to be really dangerous. And then for my colleague here, I do want to just say the people are magic. And in that sense, we are Houdini. God made us in His image, free and responsible. And the whole reason why we need civil government is because we haven't used that freedom responsibly. We've swung our fists farther than we should, and we've hit our neighbor's nose. We should be free to swing. Very good. But where civil government's proper role is to limit or to rectify it when we do hit our neighbor's nose, if we don't correct it ourselves. Our hope, at least my hope is someday I'm going to be a part of a Jerusalem above. Didn't pray, but I can preach a little bit. It says in Galatians 4:26 that the Jerusalem above is free and is the mother of us all. what has made Texas great and what has made the United States great, it's not government. It's not, at least civil government. It's been self-government. It's been family government. We do need big individuals. We need big families, big churches to use our freedom responsibly. And that is what has made our state and our nation great. It's freedom. We have the saying, carpe diem, seize the day or enjoy the day. I see this issue as an opportunity maybe to change it a little bit. And it's been a long time since I had Latin. But maybe we could say carpe liberty. And seize liberty. People like living in rural areas because they can do as they please. Now, we do have some problems, and they've come to me on county affairs when they don't respect their neighbor. And they are asking for some ordinance authority to limit their neighbor. But the best way is just to go to your neighbor and talk to them and preserve that freedom. But if we don't, we will end up with more intrusive county laws. But this, I don't have a whole lot specific to say, but we have a great opportunity here. We do have a lot of freedom left. A lot of us get depressed and are cynical about government, maybe even tempted to be anarchists. But there is a place for it, and it's a place of justice. But let's use our freedom in this sense to limit government, to limit how much we tax and how we go about it, how much we zone. Let us maybe take some of these areas outside the big municipalities and incorporate them with limiting ourselves to use that freedom responsibly and to grow. And perhaps people will want to come to those areas and invest because they don't have a property tax or intrusive zoning. We do have an example in healthcare, believe it or not. It's a small example, but I hope it grows. Oklahoma Surgical Center. They publish their prices. And they're about 20% of where you go elsewhere. Have you ever heard of that? Most of us, it's a strange idea to go into a hospital and talk about what this is going to cost. We usually shudder when we get the mail 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later. But where else in our life do we do that? We usually go in and we ask when we're going to buy a product or seek to receive a service how much it's going to cost and what are your deliverables. But in healthcare, we've thrown that out the window and asked government to do it. And what is happening is the prices are going through the roof and we're rationing it. We have a tremendous opportunity here where people have been hesitant to incorporate because of their fear of city government. But we can turn that on its head. We can incorporate and voluntarily limit our intrusiveness to really where it's absolutely necessary. Limit our economic development to common infrastructure instead of bribing people to come. I like to tell people, I left it over there, I usually raise up my Apple computer, my iPhone, and I tell people that in my district, that our state has just given this company that has no debt, more cash on hand than the federal government, $35 million. And I said it looks real good for Austin. But what people don't see is where that money's coming from. Government cannot create money. It can devalue it, it can print it, and it can take it from others and give it to some. But this is an opportunity to use the freedom that we have in these rural areas and to negotiate with the cities. And maybe they do want to, maybe someday you want to give up and you become one of those. But if they could negotiate with you, maybe they would do it in a proper manner. We had a city within the district that I serve, Gladewater, that started to annex an area. And they heard such an outcry from their neighbors that that the people were going to speak with their feet. They were not going to do more business in Gladewater, and the city council heard them and changed their mind and only annexed the area where there was consent. And Longview has some ambitious plans, but I'm thankful that some of the councilmen there are very hesitant to use that power without the consent of those that they're seeking to consider annexing. And so the main thing I want to say is seize liberty cities. Let's use what we have left. We have a great state, a great nation, and plenty of freedom left to preserve if we'll just use it responsibly. And I hope we can do that and maybe take some steps forward in the next legislature. And remember, y'all are the Houdinis. We can play like we can stop the clock and change time, but it's not the case. And the power is with y'all. Thank you so much.
Well, that was excellent. Thank you, Representative. And so we have a little bit of time left for questions. I led off kind of with this issue, and I want to ask you guys, because I think it's very tied into this issue of individual rights in our municipalities. And it's a question of annexation. How do you feel that our current annexation policy in Texas, which is, by the way, for those of y'all unfamiliar, that you can be annexed without consent if you're in an ETJ, which we've already described, how do y'all feel that plays in to the ability of forming liberty cities or being able to assert your rights within the ETJs of some of our larger cities? Anybody that wants to take that up?
Sure, I will. You know, this issue came up when we incorporated in 2008, and I remember sitting in my constitutional law class, and we were reading the state constitution, which is pretty lengthy, and there's a provision there, which I guess historically comes out of the Confederate Civil War experience, that says that all Texans have the right to alter, abolish, or change their form of local government, and applying that, thinking about, well, you know, in Von Ormy, we're trying to form a city, in San Antonio at the time was resisting. It seems to be unconstitutional. And that's when I first got my eyes opened as far as the condition of people who live in ETJs. Frankly, for a small statutory city, we can only annex through voluntary annexation. Home rule cities can annex through involuntary annexation. And so I think there is a need to give residents in ETJs greater protections or alternatives. I mean, frankly, if our Constitution is going to ring true and folks are going to have the right to determine their form of local government, if they're targeted for annexation, perhaps give them the alternative of incorporation or other types of protections. But right now, there really is no protection whatsoever. You can be involuntarily annexed. There are some procedural formalities. You know, you have to be notified. There have to be public hearings. But if the political body is determined and they're not, or if you're too small, unlike in the examples Representative Simpson gave, to have much of an effect against the big city. In Von Ormy, we were 1,300 people against 1 million. I mean, we could boycott San Antonio. It's not going to do anything. Welborne saw the same thing. They had a great argument, great people, and it wasn't successful. So yeah, there needs to be stronger protections for residents in the ETJs to self-determine.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
One of the things that I come back to on that is whenever a city like San Antonio or Houston or any of them decide they want to annex somebody, they just do it. And I tell people, revert back to the way this country started. You know, taxation without representation caused this country to be what it is today. And until the people actually come up and decide we don't want this anymore, the big government is going to continue to do it. And we have to stand up and take a stand and say, wait a minute, we need to have some of this come back into our control. And doing the Liberty City idea, that is one way to do it. But if you're within their ETJ, good luck. It's going to be a hard-fought battle.
And just briefly, I was the attorney representing Sandy Oaks. We do pro bono representation. And one of the challenges you have when you negotiate, they were able to negotiate a release. And as Mr. Gay mentioned, they had originally asked for a larger area because they were trying to balance a dense residential area with some commercial corridor, so you could have a balanced tax approach. And San Antonio, after lengthy negotiations, was finally willing to give up the dense residential area, which generally is a tax negative. I mean, because they have to service the area, but they were unwilling to give them. And I think we were arguing down to 3 commercial businesses, a couple of gas stations and a Burger King, that they were ultimately unwilling. And so the residents of Sandy Oaks opted to take what they could get and develop from within themselves. But there also has to be consideration for viability of communities, and these larger communities want to cherry pick the viable tax producing areas and keep the folks isolated or without that ability. So that's another challenge.
Yes, Mr. Grafe.
Just to add on to that, I have a real concern with the statutes that deal with extraterritorial jurisdiction. I don't think that we would have been caught really off guard like we were, and I hope that the legislature will look at requiring, if you're going to have the ETJ, at least requiring effective notice, public notice, that we can have hearings, we can talk back and forth, and give those who are involved in that extraterritorial jurisdiction the right and the liberty to be able to choose and say over some time period, no, we don't want to do this. We want to go ahead and form our own form of government, and we'll handle our affairs ourselves. And no, you don't get to just come out here in the middle of the night, which is what occurred in our case, and take a land grab. For one thing, think about this in your mind, and I'll sit down, sort of. The concept of value is something that I've spent most of my working life wrangling with. And when you take some of the sticks away from the bundle of rights that you bought when you bought your property, those rights of not having to contend with an ETJ were there when you bought your property. Now when you buy that, those property rights transfer. And unfortunately, there is no determination by appraisal districts, for example, of diminution in value when you don't have those rights. If you had a choice to buy a property in the city of Houston, ETJ, or in the rural part of Harris County, which would you pick? If you talk to the people who annexed part in Harris County with Houston 18 years ago, who now, if you go take a picture, you'll find sewage in their bar ditches, ask them how they feel about it. And they'll tell you they absolutely do not want that ETJ to continue under the same rules.
Do you want to address that, Representative? Questions from the floor? I'll go right to the back there. Yes, sir.
Afternoon. My question was just for the panel, is in terms of the reduction or the elimination of property taxes in your cities you're talking about.
I'm sorry, could you restate that for the mic real fast?
Yes, hello. In terms of the elimination or reduction of your property taxes in these Liberty cities, how are you accounting for that or subsidizing public education, given that in many terms that they're heavily funded based on property taxes?
The independent school district tax is separate from the city tax, so we're eliminating the city portion of the property tax. Okay. So they're not related. So it has no effect on the money for the local school district.
Thanks, Art. Other questions? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, you should have probably helped.
Well, first I want to say that liberty is not the absence of law or written law. Liberty exists when there's written law that is binding on the government and those who act in its name. Having fled Houston, I can tell you there is no liberty in Houston because the police and the prosecutors will tell you that they are the law, not what is written by our legislators. And the judges are pretty much under their control. They'll go along with that. I have a background in finance and took a graduate course in the history of the development of cities in America and found this fascinating. New York City had over 1 million residents before it had a city police force. For over 100 years of our initial existence as a nation, we had no public prosecutors. And yet we had a very law-abiding society with an abundance of liberty that fueled our success as a nation, that created the most prosperous nation on earth. Today, we have cities that 75–80% of their budget goes to firefighters and policemen, and their interest is not in being bound by the law, but in binding us and acting as the law, doing whatever they want. So what do you say about Liberty cities where there is no public police force, rather the citizens freely contract for security services as they feel is needed?
Well, in Von Ormy, we operate a city marshal's office, which is the same as a police department, but has actually broader authorities. But we operate a 20-officer police force on $50,000 a year. We have one paid officer. The others serve as reserve officers. They make a 24-hour commitment per month. We kind of model after our volunteer fire service. A lot of people ask, why in the world would a police officer work for free? Mainly in order to work private security jobs, they have to have their commission maintained somewhere. And we underbid the constable's office, who requires 30 hours commitment a month. So we underdo it. We get. We also have a local police fire academy or community college district near our city. So we try to pair more senior veterans with some of the rookies that come out, and it's a win-win for everyone. We mainly provide fuel for the vehicles and ammunition for training, and the officers provide their own uniforms and firearms, and so we mainly just provide training. So you can get a low-cost police force. Again, if you're under 3,000, the local sheriff is still your local primary law enforcement. So we didn't see a need to replicate a county service that we were already getting provided. But our residents wanted a supplemental service. Sometimes you call the sheriff, it takes 30 minutes. So we have our deputy marshals that can do that. Privatization, as you're suggesting, is another option. You may get into some complexities if there is a need for the statutory, well, Ernest here is a police officer. He'll know there's things that a police officer can do that a private security agent cannot. Basically, there's incidents where they'll have to call the police anyway. So maybe a mixed model. But you can have a very low-cost police force if you plan it that way.
Anybody else want to address that? I will note for the audience, the Woodlands, which is over 100,000 people, although not technically a city, it's actually a special entity that was created by Senator Williams when he represented that district. Actually contracts with Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. And so quite a large area, and it does work very well for them. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I grabbed the mic.
That's fine.
Two questions, really. Has the somebody quoted Constitution. Has the constitutionality of the ETJ been actually determined? I know it was written in the law. Mm-hmm. Has it actually been determined by the Supreme Court? And then secondly, we talked about the city, we talked about the school. What about the county, Guadalupe County? How do you control what the county does to your Liberty City?
In our case, when we incorporated, initially the county had told us that they would give us a 2-year window in which they would provide services while we got up and running. That's been a little bit challenging to get them to continue with that agreement. They've been a little bit less than forthcoming in doing that.
I think more than their tax rate, though.
Yeah, the county, the reason why counties are all for you incorporating is because they get to lose that area that they have to maintain, they have to police, they have to do anything to, but they do not drop their tax rate any for that area. Yeah. We still pay the same 31 cents on a $100 evaluation to Bexar County, and we are going to get nothing from them eventually.
Yeah,
I just want to just make a statement here that I have two houses. Both of them are in jurisdictions where we provide our own police, we provide our own trash pickup, we get no city services whatsoever. And in both of those cases, we pay not only a tax, but then we pay a private fee, if you will, to our subdivision, and that's not tax deductible. So when you make a Liberty City, now you get a tax deduction for those same fees, and it seems like I ought to be incorporating both of areas where my house is.
With regard to the constitutionality, I'm unaware of it ever being challenged. Though when we did a legislative history, the original ETJ laws were actually a restriction on municipal power. There was a big land grabs on the Gulf Coast and rumors that the city of Houston wanted to annex the entire Gulf Coast, which was the legislative debate at the time. And so they wanted to limit it to a certain number of miles outside of there. So when you ask the Texas Municipal League, for example, I'm a mayor, that people always say, well, these are the rights of the cities. When you really look at the legislative history, it was an attempt to restrict or limit the rights of cities to annex.
Great. Other questions? Miss Jana McMillan, former College Station Councilwoman.
Is there anyone that is proposing new legislation or formulating ideas to propose new legislation to relax some of the control that ETJs and cities have over outlying areas of outside of cities?
Eyes left.
Yes.
Anybody proposing legislation to restrict or deal with the ETJ issue?
Yes.
Pass the mic.
Yeah.
I'm listening. And I've had numerous conversations with constituents in my district, and so not pursued it at this point. Okay, here, my legislative director here is Michael Bullock, can help.
Yeah, the committee that you serve on, the interim report that just came out for county affairs, is the one we just did. They are recommending with ETJs that they limit it to a half-mile universally. I believe it was Walling that did it last session, and this actually was Land and Resource Management that did it. It may have been Walling that proposed it previously, but the committee does recommend that we limit ETJ authority and the actual boundary to a half-mile across the board. Doesn't matter what side you are.
That's great.
So they are working on it, and someone is probably going to file that.
Yeah. It kind of gets as large as 5 miles for the larger cities.
All right. Judge Self, I think you probably have the last question. So, Judge Self of Collin County.
Actually wanted to represent the counties here because most people think in terms of services, but the county's number one duty is the justice system. So regardless of your city tax rates, your citizens can go into county courts at law for free, minus the state filing fees and things like that. But that is our primary function. It's not water, it's not roads, it's not anything else. On your constable comment, that's one of the reasons that contracting with constables for law enforcement. That's one of the reasons that Collin County tries to get our constables to limit themselves to their warrant service and their paper service, because that is really their historical, traditional duty. Because we have, and I don't quote me on the number, but it's something like 34 different police departments in Collin County. Now, we've only got 850,000 people, so we're one of the smaller counties. But 34 police departments across Collin County is probably enough to handle it without the constables moving into the law enforcement duty, even though they're licensed peace officers. I understand, and they can. So that's one of the reasons we do limit it. And I will say one more issue on ETJs for our state legislators here. We need to normalize the authority between the county and the cities in the ETJ for permits and inspections, because right now it's a little bit out of whack.
Any comments on
Yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, it's been my experience that the counties are usually very supportive of communities incorporating because of that. Often you'll have a suburban or rural community it develops and they start looking to the county for certain municipal services. And what we find sometimes is folks get caught in this ETJ quagmire where sometimes the opposite happens. The large city doesn't want to annex, and the community in the ETJ wants municipal services, and the county is either constitutionally or statutorily prohibited from providing that service. And so then you have a community that wants services, can't incorporate, can't be annexed, and so there's also that situation that we see as well.
Yeah, we have an example of that. We have it's actually a special district that doesn't want, the city doesn't want to provide fire protection for them. Right now, the county is kind of standing back and saying, you need to sort it out with the city. Because again, the counties don't run fire trucks.
A real quick question, okay.
I just wanted to encourage all of you all and everybody here interested to engage with the legislature. Hearing Governor Abbott this morning talk about, first time I've ever heard a statewide elected official or any elected official talk about limiting the powers of cities, because that's where the worst liberalism in Texas is running rampant, is in our cities. And as Governor Abbott said separately this morning, he said the U.S. Constitution it gives all power to the states unless it's enumerated for the federal government. There's no parallel in Texas where local control is somehow enshrined in the Constitution. The Texas Constitution gives the power to the state, and they give the cities a limited amount of authority, and they're abusing it. And so it's time to rein that in. And it sounds like when people want to be annexed inside a new Liberty City, and the city of San Antonio says, no, you can't have this area that would make you economically viable, we're going to keep it for ourselves, that's an abuse that needs to be stopped. So I just would encourage everyone to stay engaged with the legislature and keep the momentum.
No argument there.
Just like to follow that up just a moment. We'd like to cite the 10th Amendment referring to reserving all the powers not delegated to the United States to the states, but it doesn't stop there, or to the people. And of course the 9th Amendment talks about all those powers enumerated is not to deny or to disparage individual rights. And we need to remember that the most local control are not municipalities, but they're individuals. And that is our most fundamental duty, is to protect their life, liberty, and property. And only when we really harm our neighbor or should we intrude. There's ways we can come together to do things by consent. And I think that's the real thing that should be emphasized with respect to annexation, is consent, mutual consent.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I do want to close with one brief thing. You may or may not have ever heard of this before, I don't know. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. Please give a round of applause to our panelists.
Okay, we'll watch for it.